Good evening, everyone. I hope you had a lovely Easter or long weekend. I'm Laura Dancho, and tonight it's the Ordinance Workshop, and I am reconvening the recessed budget workshop of April 12th, 2022. I will be chairing the workshops. This is the third workshop of the series. We have a lot to do tonight. We're going to try to get through it and not keep everyone for a terrible length of time. So we have economic development first on the list, page 17 for those of you with a book. There are three of us here, Chris Pia and Bill O'Brien and myself, and we will continue with the three of us. So Mary Dean is with us, and she can describe her budget and the request, and then we can ask questions later.
Okay, so I will start with the economic development budget, but I will be also going over the buildings and planning and zoning as well, as they both report to our office. So we have limited requests. We use a subscription called CoStar, which is vital to the job we do because it provides you with information on buildings and sites that are for sale. So they no longer have a partial subscription, and now you have to buy the whole subscription in order to get it. So we requested $4,000, and then we wanted to bring up our conference expense a bit, although our budget isn't going up, because we wanted to be able to start taking advantage of, tourism conferences and whatever conferences, even if a lot of them are still virtual, but just to be able to participate in some elected development tourism conferences if we need to. And really that was it, except for a raise for 50% of Karen Doyle's salary, commensurate with whatever the mayor would like to give her, because she shares her duties between the mayor's office and my office.
So I'd just like to add, for everybody at home was watching, it was a total 0.28% budget increase for a total budget of $283,000 for the Economic Development Office, just so everybody has an idea what we're talking about at home.
Right, I see that. So let's, even though we're doing more sections, let's talk about this one first and see if anybody has any questions on this budget request for economic development. Gentlemen.
Through you, Madam Chair. You want to go, Bill? No, go ahead. I was just going to say, Mary, how are you? Thank you for everything. What was the commercial? What did we increase the grand list by this past year? It was mid-threes or 2.9?
I think it was 2 point. I just read it. I think it was
2.8%.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, a little over 2.
A little over 2. Thank you. And I know you guys did a tremendous amount of work last year during COVID with kind of being the hub for a lot of businesses for facilitating and branching out and basically getting them what they needed. So that doesn't make it to these books, and I know a lot of businesses were appreciative, so thank you.
Thank you.
That's right. Thank you for pointing that out. Bill, do you have anything?
Well, I can't help but think about the other night at the public forum, somebody made the comment that we've had no economic development. So I guess I haven't driven around town, because not only has a lot happened the past year, there's a lot happening in the coming years. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with no further questions on the economic development, we'll move on to planning and zoning on page 20.
Oh, okay, so planning and zoning just had 3 requests. They are required by new legislation to for planner and zoning commission training. It did happen this year as well, so they needed to add a bit to their budget for that. They needed 2 new printers, and they have additional Casio certification for their zoning commissioners, so they added their membership dues slightly. So it is at a percentage change of 1.6% for planning and zoning. No.
In your book, it's a percentage change of 2.3%.
Right.
Yeah. I also wanted to remind you that on Wednesday night, I went over the planning and zoning revenues, which are also part of this budget. And those revenues are staying as the same numbers we had last year. Those projections are adequate, and we'll hit them this year, and we'll hit them next year with all which is going on.
Revenues are on page 7, if anyone has any questions on the revenues.
Accurate too, then, right, for the buildings. That looks really high.
Does this incorporate the raised fees?
Yes.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for planning and zoning? Moving on to building inspection, page 40.
So they have made a request. So they have, they split Veronica, who runs our viewpoint and works out of the health department. They split her salary. They pay 1 day where health pays 4. So they are giving her a raise, and she is more than her worth in gold, Veronica. And then, and they've agreed with it with health department, that it's commensurate with whatever health department was giving. And then they asked for a uniform allowance of $300 because we felt it's important when they're entering homes that they're identified as a town of Stratford employee.
That makes sense.
So that's it for buildings.
And again, can you tell me if the gas and oil, that's for vehicles, I'm assuming?
The gas and oil is for the vehicles.
Vehicles. Any other questions for building inspection? All right, hearing none. Anything further on economic, any of the categories before we move on? Okay, Mary, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Libraries next
do
on the
library?
list? Do you want to do, do
Library,
you
wanna
want to do them in
come up?
order?
Yes, we'll stick to the order.
The library's on page 36.
Hey, thanks. I just have a couple of handouts for you,
That's Jerry
because we do.
Doria. Hi.
Thank you. Yes, please. I brought way more copies than I need.
So Sherry, with you, you have Jerry.
I have Jerry, and I have Don Petrimus, who is our board treasurer.
Welcome, nice to meet you. Jerry, you're Diorio?
Diorio.
Diorio.
D-I-O-R-I.
Jerry.
Chris is handing out the detail on our budget, because I know in the mayor's version, it's consolidated into a grant. And I wanted to make sure that you all had the information, the detail. Chris will come around, I'll get you a copy. I've got Chris handing things out for me, it's really sweet. Thank you. I did email that budget out to you all, but I don't assume that you all have a chance to read your email, so.
So Sherry's going to present the library budget. They're asking for a 4.11% increase from last year.
A point of clarification.
Go ahead, Dawn.
So in the mayor's proposed mill rate calculation, a 4% was included, not 4.11. And this page was left, there was a clerical error on this page. So the mayor's proposed is actually 4%. It's not, it's just a clerical error.
Okay.
It's included in the mill rate calculation, it's just not reflected correctly on this page.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dawn. Everybody get
And that
that?
amount is,
4.11,
your request was,
correct.
the library's request is 4.11, the mayor's proposed budget is 4%.
Okay,
That's my point of clarification.
okay.
And it's about, I don't have, let me see. It's, 4% is 3,472,506.
Gotcha. Okay. So the library budget this year, just as a point of reminder for all of you, the library's budget includes all of our personnel, our benefits costs, our health insurance, retirement plan, which you don't see in other departments. One of the new things that's on our budget this year is that we have a line for our unfunded liability, which is a retirement payout for one employee that we're anticipating will retire this year. Historically, this has been, years ago, the town actually held a small fund for us for these payouts, but I think a few years ago, the town audit just basically said, no, you can't do that for the library. So we're taking that on ourselves, on our side of the budget, and I know that the board is taking that, the library board is taking that into consideration for the coming year, which is why we have included $22,779 in our budget for that individual. The other changes are smaller dollar amounts. You're going to see that our education line looks like it's a huge increase of 11%, but it's not. What we did is we consolidated education and our travel lines, which were previously separate, and we realized we were using them in the same way, so we collapsed them. So it makes that education line look that much larger. Our printing and reports budget is up because we reduced it drastically during COVID. We weren't doing as many programs. We weren't going to as many outdoor locations that, outside locations and handing things out. This year we are returning to that, and we are looking to make sure that we have the proper things to hand out to people. When you see the building equipment increase of 100%, it is because we reduced it by half last year. We had just opened our children's department with brand new equipment, and in the interest of trying to save the budget, the town budget, we cut that line because we wanted to acknowledge that we weren't going to be worried about equipment in the children's department this current year. Any questions?
Any questions for the library? Mr. Pio?
Through you, Madam Chair. Hi, Sherry.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Couple questions for you. Just the health insurance. Do we have a final figure on that? Because I know we spoke last week, Mr. Timiak, on the town-wide level. We're waiting to finalize some things that are in flux.
We do have our final number, and actually our increase for our staff is at 8% this year. It's the first increase we've had in about 3 years, which, you know, we try not to be too upset about 8%. The line reflects a 5.53% increase, but our calculations actually were at 8.6%. And what we're tracking is that this will be okay for us. This budget funding will be sufficient based on the staff we currently have, based on a new hire that has not opted in for insurance and isn't planning to. So we're comfortable with that number.
So the 8.6%, to be specific, is effectively the new change number here.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And then Dawn, question through you for finance. What Sherry was talking about with the liability payout, are they the only department in town that does something similar to that in terms of building? I understand what they're doing, it makes sense, but taking on through their budget versus through the towns? And I know library's a little unique based off of all the departments, but.
So the library is its own separate entity, and we don't fund their retirements. So yes, they're the only ones that would have that in their budget. They're not part of the town's pension.
Thank you. And last question, over the last couple of years, I know 2 years ago we had the conversation about the COVID, the PPP loan. Mm-hmm. Net of that, and I'm looking at the F21 actuals, but the 20 and 21, how did we finish at the end of the year? Were we short? Did we have a surplus, or in terms of the overall budget, in terms of what we gave?
Overall budget, our savings for the last fiscal year, we ended up using that money to enhance cleaning and to bring back some of our part-time staff. So the savings the previous year was 15%. The savings last year, I'm looking at Jerry's notes just to see. I can't remember. Let me take a look at my notes for a second.
Sherry, the 15% was for 2020?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Yeah. For last year, No, we had returned we had put our hours back in place, and we were doing enhanced cleaning, so we needed that extra. There wasn't a huge savings for the town.
So there was no surplus, it went to cleaning?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have an approximate what that was?
I'll have to get back to you on
Okay.
that, I don't know.
Thank you. If you could, I'd appreciate
I'll
it.
send that to you.
That's fine. And then last question, Madam Chair, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Sherry, can you give a breakdown in the operating budget, under the service highlight, the library highlights section? 139,675 items borrowed or downloaded. I remember when we talked about it last year, it was like, I think it was like 80% of stuff was downloaded, which made sense due to the pandemic. What is that trending at now?
It's trending at about 30%.
Download? Or,
Downloads.
okay. So of the 139,000, downloads about 30%.
Yeah.
And then of the 9740 in person and online, do you kind of have a breakdown? Do you track who's come in? People attended 811 library programs. Do you, I got to believe you track probably through GoToMeeting or something, attendees versus in person?
We do keep track of our attendees in person versus online, yes. Right now, it's actually leveling out. Most of our adult programs are mostly in person, so it's about 85% of the adults coming in person. Children's programs, it's closer to 30% at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And the statistics sheet that I handed you, I know Bill's about to ask a question, there's a figure on here that we're really, really proud of, and that is that 60% of all of Stratford residents have current library cards, which is compared to a statewide average of only 37%. So I think that's something we can all be proud of.
So Sherry, fundraisers, do you guys, you do your own fundraisers?
We are doing fundraisers.
And are you saying that 90% is funded by the town and 10% is through your fundraisers? Or what do you use your fundraiser money for?
Correct. Yeah, our fundraiser money is used for a number of things, actually. We primarily use it for materials, but we also use it for our electronic resources, our downloadable materials. We have been using some of our money for building equipment, primarily in the children's room, because the board did designate a gift to help bring some other items into the new children's department. We also are using some of that money, not so much from fundraisers, but from the board, for our strategic planning process, which we are in the middle of this year. We have not done a strategic plan professionally in 20 years. We've done it ourselves. So we're very excited to be engaged in that process, and that's part of where some of that money's going.
So the mayor's proposed is 4.0%. The 0.11%, how would that affect your budget?
We'd have to look at individual lines to find places to save. Yeah, our biggest line for savings is payroll, obviously, because it is our largest line. But we would look across the board.
Great. Any further questions for the library?
It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. I actually thought it just was cut off. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's fine. It's fine.
We have another
Anything
participant tonight. If there's nothing else, we can excuse you, and thank you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to your event this coming weekend.
Thank you all. Gotcha. Well, thank you.
Next on the list would be the Registrar Voters. We have Mr. DeCilio and Dr. Smith. I did say Smith. Dr. Simon. That's page 16 for those following in the book. Welcome. We'll follow the same procedure. You can go through your budget and we will ask questions of the two of you. Thank you, Dr. Simon and Mr. DeCilio, for attending tonight.
Got it. Overall, our budget increased 1.72%, and really the only line item that increased was the elections account. It increased just over $4,000, and that'll fluctuate from year to year based on the election itself. Last year was a local election. This year's a gubernatorial election, which always increases turnout. So that increase in turnout, it adds to the each individual polling location in terms of ordering ballots, and also adding one more person to each location in terms of staffing. Overall, everything else we were able to maintain. For the second year in a row, we've kept our payroll at the reduced rate of 3 individuals. Last year's budget, I could just say that, you know, obviously all budgets are estimates of what we're going to do. And last year's budget, you know, one of the things that our office has always prided itself in is including every particular possible expense that could take place. And one of those is the primaries and specials account. So last year, we anticipated maybe having a full primary on both sides of the aisle, and neither of that happened. So we do expect a pretty big savings from, you know, from last year's primary specials. This year, we are anticipating dual primaries come August because it is a governor's race. There's the Secretary of State's offices, all the, you know, Congress, Senate, and I can tell you right now from both perspectives that there are several individuals, being that Secretary of State is an open office, there are several individuals on both sides that have expressed interest in running for that, so odds of us having primaries and having to expend that particular account this year to fully is probably pretty good.
Great, I agree with everything my Republican colleague said. In meeting with town budget officials, there were 2 other recommendations that I made that are not reflected in the budget. One is to return the pay status of the registrars back to part-time status. It's based on 2 things. My first year in the office, keeping track of the amount of time that I spent. We're extremely busy certain times of the year, much less busy in other times. And there were hundreds of hours that I certainly was productive in the office, but I think could have been scaled back in terms of the funding for the office. The second piece of evidence I had is I talked to our colleagues throughout Fairfield County and other towns and other communities of Stratford size, and found that we're just paying considerably more than they are for the average registrar. It certainly is true that it's a little bit of apples and oranges. Some towns give additional duties to the town clerk, some towns give them to the registrar, but I still am of the opinion that we can safely scale back the office to part-time status for the registrars. The second point is, one of the things I really like about our office is I'm a big believer in one office helping another in busy times, called kind of a all hands on deck approach. And we do that in our office. Our administrative assistant is really good about going to the finance office in busy times and helping out there, sorting out the email and the UPS and everything that kind of comes in. So I recommended that she continue to work full-time, but that in terms of apportioning the cost of her office, half be assigned to the registrar's office, half be assigned as a flyer or assistant to the mayor or whatever. It was explained to me that's kind of, it wouldn't be very easy to do that, perhaps cumbersome to do that. So that recommendation also is not reflected in the budget.
Thank you for that. Can you tell me, this last election was a really big absentee ballot year, and how that affected the hours spent on that one particular November election? And if you feel that still being part-time would be, 2 part-time registrars would be able to have accommodated and accomplished all the work that was required for that, using last year's election as an example.
Sure. If memory serves, I think there were 10,000 absentee ballots for the 2020 presidential election, 2,000 last year for the mayoral election. It's still a lot. The town clerks do a lot of the handling and processing of those. We certainly count them. That's kind of our major role. But I'm convinced that if we were to kind of sort out our time during the year, working longer periods in election season, less so perhaps in the middle of summer from April to August, we'd be able to kind of sort that out.
Mr. Pia.
Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry. Gentlemen, good evening. How are you? Mr. Simon, just a question for you. The part-time proposal you had submitted, can you define part-time as you're proposing?
Sure, I was very much open to that. It varies widely. Some offices in communities much smaller than ours are open literally 2 hours on 1 day a week. Communities more similar in our size, like Fairfield, are open full-time, but the registrars get roughly $35,000. We found some towns they do get benefits, medical benefits. Some towns they do get retirements. It varies widely.
So what would your recommendation then be? Because you're asking us to cut it to part-time, but what is, in a qualitative way, what does that mean?
Sure. In my, I would work that out with town budget officials, something to the effect of 20 hours a week, something like that.
Okay.
With a salary of 35 to 40,000, but I certainly was never locked into any numbers.
Okay, so between 20 to 30 hours a week, salary to be adjusted. You said you proposed this. I know you guys went to the mayor and the administration put forth the mayor, the mayor's proposed budget. What calculations did you do to get that?
I stressed that I was wide open in terms of the number of hours and whether benefits would be assigned or not. I simply wanted to kind of get the idea on the table because I've only been in office 1 full year, and I thought it was time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just an idea. It's not a hard number that you have.
Do not have a hard number on it, correct?
Okay. You mentioned in your statement, you compared it to other towns, and this is probably my 5th go around, 4th for Bill. We've had this conversation a couple times over the years, and your predecessor and Mr. DeCilio have gone out and done comps to other towns. Trumbull, Fairfield, Shelton, Milford, Monroe, Seymour, the whole 9. I 100% agree with your statement. There's no true apples and oranges out there. I mean, you have certain departments, certain ways of maintaining the integrity of the vote in different towns that keep certain contingency accounts at one department and others, and I get that. So it is really, truly hard to do apples to apples. But from a pure population standpoint, pure voter registration standpoint, what's the closest to Stratford that you found?
Sure, we're perhaps double the salary for the registrar is perhaps double the cost of nearby towns, putting Bridgeport aside. And the more interesting, I think, comparison is looking at cities and towns that were ranked 11th to 20th in population in the state. Stratford is 17th, and Bristol is somewhat close to us, but we're considerably ahead of the others.
What about Trumbull and Milford?
I can dig them out if you want, but top of my head, they're paying 20 to 30,000, something like that.
You can get back to me on that one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm good right now, Ms. Dancho.
So I'm going to ask a quick question to Dr. Simon. If you do go to part-time, or if you both go to, do you know how much that would save in this budget right now?
Sure, it's a matter of kind of what the salary is set at, and then benefits is a key question. The benefits were all over the place elsewhere. Some people are getting health benefits, some people getting retirement benefits. It will be a matter of how we calculate those things.
Well, any full-time person would be getting benefits, right? So all 3 of you are getting benefits.
That's correct.
I just wanted to look at this page. And then your administrative assistants, you're saying that she should be a floater? Is that what you're recommending?
I really like the way that she is able to kind of help out other offices. So she certainly should remain a full-time status with the current salary and benefit package that she has. But to me, what I know about budgeting is you want to assign the cost as close to where the labor kind of it takes place. So perhaps half of her time could be assigned to the registrar's office and half elsewhere in the administration.
Mr. Timniak.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing the proposal to the table. We did hear Mr. Simon's proposal. The administration chose against going in that direction for a couple of reasons. One, the intent of the council by making the registrar's office full-time is to make sure that we do have full-time registrar voters in the office. The expectation is that every election detail is handled by people who acknowledge when they run for office, this is a full-time job. And in the last 2 years, what we've seen come through as the town administrator, how often the election guidelines, election rules have changed. A lot of that is due to the pandemic, but a lot of that is due to the national wave in how things are coming through in different regulations we have. So our position as far as making the registrar's office part-time is the future of the office is probably end up with full-time election offices statewide. We see it happening in other states. One, we want to make sure that we don't have the problems other towns have when it comes to election issues here in Stratford. In my 7 years here, we haven't, and I'm very proud of that fact, because we do have Registrar Voters who pay attention to every email we get from the Secretary of State, and we understand how that impacts. If we were to have a situation where we were to go to part-time, then it becomes an issue of part-time when. And the when is a big thing, because right now, while the Secretary of State's office and the legislature is in session right now, you would consider this being a part-time. Well, we have 2 registrars who are responsible for following and making sure they're up to date on all the information coming out of the state capitol. We often have special elections in this town, which was taken into account. So they have to be prepared at all times to do that. I have looked at other towns, and for the reasons Mr. Simon says is good, I see flaws in those towns because of how they're not prepared to handle those issues coming forward. So that was one, that was the position of the administration on why we didn't accept that recommendation for part-time Registrar Voters. The other situation with the administrative assistant is strictly based upon pandemic. I have not used the assistant in the registrar's office throughout the year on any regular basis other than pandemic-related issues. We're allowed to do that because their administrative assistant is an at-will employee, not a union employee. So I can assign her to duties if we do have a long line in the tax office and I have nobody there to make sure that the line is separated for social distancing, that the door is open. I have had the floaters, but when you go to hire someone in a part-time, they need regular hours. So it's hard to call in someone to cover the door, or when the doors were locked, the FedEx guy's leaving the mail right outside the Registrar Voters office, and then Judy was able to help distribute that stuff. So it wasn't all hands on deck, and it was very timely, and I am very appreciative of the work she's done. I do hope that the pandemic ends and that we can get back to operations. But as far as the administrative role, organizing that and splitting that up amongst other departments for the purposes of showing the Registrar Voters office has reduced their budget by $4,000 is more of an administrative headache than it is a victory on that. So that was the administrative position on why those recommendations weren't taken.
Mr. Pia? Oh, Mr. O'Brien, go ahead, and then Chris.
Well, Lou, we have to remember that in fiscal year 2021, you did eliminate one position, which really was appreciated. 2 questions. One, first, there's been calls for a referendum in town. If a referendum was held for any reason, is that a separate election that would have additional cost? Or
Yes, that would. I mean, I've estimated for primaries and specials, but it's really primaries and not specials. If there was a referendum at any point, it would actually add another $30,000 to $35,000 to our cost, because we have to set up as if it was a regular election. Yes.
And then the other thing is, based more on the years you've been doing this, this year we had so many home sales in Stratford, incredible number. You must have seen a lot more. How would you compare this year to other years based on the people moving out and the people moving in?
So one of the things that we always see if you read the things online is the registrars, the registered voters went from 35,000 registered voters to 35,300, and people say, well, why do we have full-time registrars for 300 voters? Well, what they don't know is 6,000 people moved out and 6,000 people moved in. And it's not just adding people to the registrars list, it's also taking them off of the registrars list. We do daily, we add people and we remove people on a daily basis from canvassing the vote, from people registering at the Department of Motor Vehicles, walking through the door. There's all sorts of different times that we register them and also that we take them off due to deaths. So it's a constant fluctuation of people coming in and people coming out of our municipality. And Stratford is a very transient municipality where it's affordable to everybody. So therefore you do see a lot of fluctuation in home sales and people coming in and a lot of out-of-staters that are coming in for the first time. And using our voter systems, which they had different systems when they were in, whether it's New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, so.
Councilman, to your point, we did our first annual report for the office, kind of looking at numbers hard. You would think in a presidential year there would be more changes in voter records than it would be in any other year. I think there were 3,000 changes in Stratford in 2020, and last year the number actually went up to 5,000, even though there was no presidential election to drive it. And it's very, very much the transiency and the issues that you're talking about.
And then one final, how do you stay on top of those that die? I mean, where do you get the reports from?
Two things. One, we get them from the town clerk's office, who gives us a monthly report, but also we do look through the obituaries. And, you know, we don't catch them all through the obituaries, but at the same time, at the end of the month, when the town clerk sends us a report, we go double check and we make sure that the people that, you know, sometimes we've overlapped, we did catch them and sometimes we didn't, so we then remove them that way as well.
Hello.
Go ahead, Ms.
The chair.
Rice.
Yes, just wondering if you could clarify how much this would save the town if we went from full-time to part-time? If you could clarify those numbers.
Sure, that would be a matter of what the salary was set at and whether, if there were benefits packages that kind of go with it. We're talking perhaps $30,000. I realize that's not a lot in terms of the overall budget. But I'm actually impressed in my 1 year here by how tight the budget is. Stratford does not waste money on things, and I want to do what we can in our office to further that.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Pia?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for confirming we have tight budgets and we don't waste things. I agree with you. To the question, though, and this is my question to you, Mr. Simon, is this. You want us to cut it to part-time. Part-time's nothing more than a word. What is the hard number? What are the calculations? If you're coming to me and asking me to vote on your proposal, I need to know hard facts, and you haven't provided those.
Sure, I thought it was presumptuous of me to kind of lock into numbers and kind of not budge. So I thought as part of the budget process, working with town budget officials, if there was interest in my idea, we would work out those numbers into something specific. There wasn't. That's fine. I simply wanted to get the issue on the table this year. And I think and through this and the other budget process, I hope I've done that.
And what's changed since last year? Because I remember when we had the conversation, you agreed with Lou 100%.
Yeah, I was only in office, I think, 4 weeks before I had to come up with some kind of a budget recommendation. I thought it was kind of presumptuous to push it really hard at that point. Now I've had a year's experience.
So it has nothing to do with your campaign promise 2 years ago?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I want to. Part of the thought process was when this position, it's not a hobby. All right, this is a real position that we want full-time people engaged in this position. This position has 2 things: 1, real legal consequences, and 2, more important than that, election integrity behind it.
I agree. This position is too important to haggle over salaries, which are not terribly large in comparison to a lot of others. And the entire budget was reduced by 2.76% last year, and it's only requesting an additional 1.72% this year, which is not a lot, and I don't think it's enough to warrant compromising our election integrity. So we will take it under advisement. This is a budget workshop, and all of us are going to have opinions. And if anybody else has anything else on the Registrar Voters.
Can I just add one more thing?
Mr. DeCilio.
Just to touch on what Mr. Simon said about apples to apples. It is very hard to compare apples to apples when it comes to the registrar's office throughout the state. He chose a few of them, and I've given an analysis of Milford every year, which is basically the same size municipality, and actually our budget's less than theirs. Mr. Simon mentioned Fairfield about the 2 registrars, but he failed to mention that they have assistants that are full-time. So some of the registrars, like Greenwich, part-time registrars, 4 full-time assistants. So when you want to compare apples to apples and talk about just personnel alone, you can get into all different aspects of the registrars. He talked about Bristol. Bristol has also seasonal help. You have, New Britain, who has actually a Democrat and Republican separated budget. So it is very hard to compare apples to apples when you talk about the office itself. I know he didn't do the calculations about a part-time, but I estimated like is $28,000 to $30,000, and just to give you an idea what we're talking about here, the $28,000 to $30,000, you're talking about 68 cents per household you'll save. So that's what we've wasted 20, 30 minutes on. 68 cents per household we're willing to save.
Thank you for that calculation. Does anybody have any comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out. Do you want to do Public Works next, or do you want to,
Let's do public safety, because I have to call the Public Works Director, so we can do that. We'll do public safety.
did you say Public Safety?
Public safety will start off with our esteemed police department.
Police. Chief McNeil, welcome. Police is going to be, we'll start with page 51 in the book, and then we'll just move through the categories.
I'll just give you a quick, brief overview.
Yes.
All our increases is pretty straightforward budget. It's all going to be contractual increases to meet the wage increases they received. We have some increase in equipment costs in the police investigation. There's an additional $5,000 charge for equipment service, which is our laser mapping device called a Faro, which we use for all major crime scenes or accidents. So there's an increase there. We also have to increase in our professional standards for training, that we have to meet the police accountability bill now. We also have the psychological testing we have to send all officers through, and drug testing. So that's probably about $20,000 increase right there. We also increased the FTO, which is a field training officer. He used to get 1 hour a day to train someone. Now he gets 2 hours, so we had to increase that cost. That comes out of training. Otherwise, that's about it. Crime's down, things are good in town, and that's where we're at. Like I said, straightforward.
So when I went through the budget list, I see that the Juneteenth holiday is costing us pretty much a total of $50,000 between all these different categories. Does anybody have any questions for the police department?
What did you just say about 50,000?
Yeah.
Where is that? I didn't see that.
So if you look on each of the different categories, you'll see sometimes that the notes, the highlights at the bottom, supplementary line item
Right,
includes
yeah.
increases for Juneteenth holiday. This one for administration is $655. Another page is $10,000. 164, then 33,000, 628, 594 for police records. I'm assuming gas and oil on all of these is, again, vehicles?
Correct.
Correct.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Mr.
Maybe just for clarity, Mr. Chief, can you just talk to that? Are we expanding? I'm all for having the Juneteenth holiday and doing whatever we need. Are we expanding it as a broader scale? Like what's driving, I guess, the increased cost to these notes?
It's called a cash out because it's a holiday credit. So the officer has a choice to either use it, take the day off, or they can cash it out. And we have to plan for them to cash it out. Not everybody will cash it out, but I have to plan that they will. So that's at the end of the beginning of the year in January, they all cash out their holiday credits.
So we're just planning for the worst if.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes. How does is it the same thing for other holidays, like for instance, the 4th of July? This is standard procedure and we're just adding in the new holiday?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Juneteenth was just added last year, so that's why it's separated out, I'm assuming, right? And it's new for this year.
Madam Chair,
Ms.
before we get away from the holiday, who pays for the police coverage at graduations? Board of Ed or Board of Ed?
That's right.
Because I see they're calling for the graduation date of June 20th.
Yep,
which-
Board of Ed pays for
The
it.
holiday.
That's correct.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Pia.
Chief, as always, I ask you, do you guys, does this cover everything you need to keep your officers safe and doing their job? Do you need anything else?
No, this budget's good, it's bare bones, and it's, we're doing very well, so. I don't need anything else.
As always, I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you and your fellow officers do, so just let us know what you need.
Thank you.
We need a way to stop the ATVs from running wherever they feel like. Golf carts.
It's a
So,
state problem.
I know that this isn't a public safety meeting, right? But the cost of adding surveillance cameras and all of that, I'm sure, is going to be in CIP, CEP somewhere.
That is correct.
Okay. Any other questions for police? Mr. O'Brien?
Chief, how's the manpower? What's the status of manpower these days?
We just added 2 today, so we're at 105. We're funded for 106. They'll be starting the academy next week, so I'll be hiring another one this summer, so we'll be at full funded man.
Because we keep hearing about other towns are having trouble getting,
doing
so
okay.
that's a good sign.
Yeah, I think it's because the chief's really good.
That's what I heard either. Chief better stick around for a while.
I just want to remind everybody that the police department does have a revenue page on the budget, if anybody had any questions.
So revenues are in the beginning of the book. Page 10, thank you. Take a look at that now. Does anybody have any questions on revenues?
The one, Madam Chair, through you,
Yes.
that jogged my memory. The one question to that is, I know about a year and a half ago, the council passed, we changed it around a little bit for the collecting the ticket court with trying to expedite those for a lot of old outstanding tickets. Has that been effective?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's like third-party billing.
I'm sorry?
It was
Oh, for the
like
extra duty
third-party
bill?
billing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, we get a large sum of money from every car that you see at a road job. We just raised it to $25 an hour, so that brings in, I think we're up to 300,000 already. Don can probably confirm that, but it's a lot of money that comes in that way.
Anything else for police? Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Have a good night. Thanks, Chief.
Fire department's up next.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening, Counselor. Hope everybody's well. Hope everybody had a good Easter.
Fire is next, and they are, thank you. I had my grandson today, and I don't think I got this far. 47. We have administration, suppression, prevention. We did communication.
So if you don't mind, I would just like to express my thanks for what the town has done for us and our budgets through the years. If I can just explain how how production was in the past year. We've all had our problems with COVID. We've all learned a lot. We all learned a lot about pandemics. I'm going to point out some highlights, though, of what happened. So we've really concentrated on fire prevention the past several years. It's really taken off in the past three to 4 years, and especially this past year. We've really been pushing smoke detection in every house. It's our goal, the Deputy Chief's project here. We really would like to have smoke detection in every house in this town. And with that, we've kind of partnered up with American Red Cross, and they took us on as a customer, basically. So they provide us with many free smoke detectors. They wanted to see how this program was going to go. They like us so much that they made the town of Stratford a model for the state of Connecticut on installation of smoke detection. It's an early warning system. Since August of this past year, we've put in almost 500 smoke detectors. And just to, a positive note on that, we've had, through the years, now this goes back several years, but through the years, we've had 4 families that were saved by smoke detectors that we installed. So that's life-saving right there. The fire marshal himself had conducted a study about the hearing impaired in this town. We have a lot of elderly, and then we come to find out in the school system, the schools came to us and said, hey, we have a lot of students that are hearing impaired. What can you do for us? So part of this study was to determine how many people in town were hearing impaired and what the need would be for smoke detection. And we saw the number was quite alarming, actually. So the fire marshal had applied for a grant, and we were awarded a grant of over $60,000 to purchase bed shaking type devices. So it would go under your mattress, it would shake the bed if the smoke alarm activated, and a light would blink. So it would wake you up, you would actually see the light blinking, and you would know what the purpose was. Fantastic. Other municipalities, we get calls all the time from other municipalities. They want to know how we did this, where we found this grant, how it works, and a lot of positive feedback. We also received a grant. We applied for and received a grant for training with below grade and steep grade rescues. So we received about $28,000 on that. That's a huge plus for us. One of our big purchases this past year was buying a piece of fire apparatus. It's a specialty. It's a combination rescue pumper truck. Very
Margot,
expensive.
it's always a pleasure, Margot.
Through much work of the committee and the deputy chief here, they were assigned the task of getting that number to me by this past December, before prices were going to go up. The prices were going up across the board. To our luck, the date was extended a little bit into February, so they were tasked to get that number in. The number came in, which basically saved the town $66,000 just by getting it in on time. And with the deputy chief beating up the manufacturer, he saved even more money. He saved another $32,000 by prepayments. So with that, our budget here is, if you want to go to page 47, if that's where you want to start. Fire administration, we're really not asking for anything other than what our salary increases were.
Anybody have questions for the fire administration? Or on any of the fire presentation at all? Or do you want to go through each of the pages, or did you?
Okay, so fire suppression, which is our biggest nut here, is it's salary. Salary is the top call there.
Thanks, Margot. Good idea.
Really, we're keeping everything in line with what it was. You know, the increases are contractual. Increases in maintenance, that's going sky high, and we're going to see. We already know that this is going to go even higher in the coming years. So we should prepare ourselves. A minimum 8% increase on purchasing, and maintenance is going to go probably equal. So we're looking at we want to purchase new fire apparatus down the road is going to be, we have to think about that. So we have to do like a major 5-year plan, if not 10-year plan also, because it's going to get expensive from this point on.
Do you have that new piece of equipment?
It's
the
ordered.
Newest? It's ordered.
Yeah, well, we signed the contract. It's a long process. They have to draw it out. They have to put it on paper. We all have to agree to what we signed for. And then it'll go into a production.
So I know that the town council voted to, I think it was $1 million or whatever.
I believe it was about 780.
Yeah, the overall price is over $800,000.
Okay.
So, not to say get used to it, but that's what's coming down the road for all trucks. Even this pump, just a regular pumper. We're looking at a very expensive piece of apparatus going forward.
So you're
That's
putting a
nationwide.
5-year plan together.
Well, we do. We do have a plan to replace.
Okay.
We have to watch our pennies also. So, but we also have to keep in mind the maintenance costs are going sky high, so we have to outweigh, is it better just to replace it or maintain it?
Through you, Madam Chair, Chief, to that point, just the maintenance cost of the trucks alone, don't we do a lot of that in-house
We
with
do a
Public
lot.
Works?
Yes.
So would that 8% still be applicable?
No, not
Okay.
for that part of it. So,
Okay, that's what I was,
It's really parts at this point, and buying new equipment is very expensive. So, Public Works has been excellent with taking care of our equipment. We have some real good mechanics over there, and we take advantage of them. We do. So, they treat us well.
I think I saw 2 fire trucks back there.
You only saw 2?
Well, the others must have
They
been
go-
lower than the
they-
fence.
See, that's kind of the problem. The more sophisticated these apparatus get through the years, the more they break down. So, and getting parts is not easy. You can order it today, and they say, oh, maybe next week, maybe 3 weeks from now.
So with this new truck purchase, will you be retiring a truck?
Yes.
Like-
So, and that's that's step 2, is what do we do with this truck? We're going to try to sell it outright and regain some more money for the town.
one more question,
Yeah.
Madam Chair. Chief, I ask you about this every year just because it's that one thorn in my side, but that callback number. If you can continue to do whatever you can, I'd appreciate it.
So we're in negotiations now, and we're bringing up some of the line items that we're picking up on are related to overtime. So sick time, unnecessary time off, stuff like that.
Madam Chair.
Mr. O'Brien?
While on that subject, it's nice to see a reduction of about 234,000, almost 235,000 compared to fiscal year 2021 on callback, so I like that.
Ms. Rice?
Just a quick question. You spoke about the hearing impaired population here. Just wondering if you had a number of how large it is, or how many people in Stratford are
How
hearing
many we
impaired?
have installed?
Yeah, how many you installed, or how large the population is that we have here in Stratford?
So it goes by, they take into account all the elderly, and they assume that most of them have some sort of hearing loss. And then with the number that we got from the school, from Board of Ed, we're looking at about 20,000 people, households that could potentially use this device.
Oh.
That $68,000 that we have is limited to about 260 units, I think. That's it. They're very expensive, and they're installed by us. So we don't just hand them out. We go out, we do an evaluation, and then we feel, if we feel that it's necessary, or if they have a doctor's type note that says they're in need of one, we'll put it in. But they're very expensive. It's not something that we can sustain forever.
Thank you so much.
So just one other question on the fire extinguishers, which I think are the fire smoke detectors. How do you determine who gets them?
So we're not going to deny anybody a smoke alarm. So we have an evaluation system. So if fire apparatus, if the fire department goes out for any call, if it's a medical call, if it's a public service call, or if you just call in, you say, hey, I need a smoke alarm. We'll come out, we'll do an evaluation, and it's based on your design of your house, square footage. We will determine where and how many to put in the house. We don't hand them out like candy because we just don't have them. Thank God that Red Cross is helping us, because they're really replacing, and they're giving us good product too. It's not the cheap end. They're giving us some good product. So typically, a residential house, 2 to 3 units we'll put in.
Chief, to that, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Chief, to that point, so that's a great point you brought up. So if you go on a medical, you and EMS show up for chest pain, you guys are obviously going to do an assessment of the house, because that's just standard operating. If you guys feel like, hey, this is a great candidate going forward for smoke detectors, your department will do an outreach follow-up after the fact and offer the services?
Yes. So our goal is to install it at that moment. So when timing is right. So obviously, if you're having a major incident, we're not going to stop that working on the patient to install this. We'll make an appointment. We'll come back. But if there's many times we're in a house where there's a little bit of downtime. We'll have a guy. We'll assign 2 guys to walk the house, with permission. Walk the house. We'll check the smoke alarm. If it doesn't work, We have them right on the rigs. We'll install it. There's no charge to this. It's a give back to the municipality.
So I just have another question about multifamily housing, the dense housing units, and all of that, and the fire prevention for those types of developments. I understand that the fire department inspects those buildings, and I'm just wondering how that impacts your manpower, how you schedule that, and with the new buildings being proposed, how do you see that impacting your manpower?
For prevention type stuff or smoke?
Just for inspections.
Okay, so we have an office that is at full capacity, would be at 5 personnel. So a secretary, a fire marshal, and 3 deputy fire marshals. It can be handled. The state regulations that what they require us to do is almost impossible. Every municipality has a problem with that. So we do our best. So in the past, we've designed a system where we prioritize, and we're going to prioritize where people are sleeping. So we'll spend most of our energy in family homes, multifamily homes, like you said, hotels, anywhere where somebody's going to sleep at night. So they get priority, and then we start moving to larger facilities, big box stores, large gathering entertainment places, and then we work our way down.
Did you ever go into condominiums, like condominiums?
Generally, no. Condominiums are considered a single family unless it's within a building. So 1700 Broadbridge Avenue, it's a 5-story building. Mm-hmm. Those are a condo setup.
I'm thinking of Deerfield Woods as well, like Deerfield Woods up.
Deerfield Woods, a condo setup, yeah. So we go in there, and what we'll do is we'll do all the common areas automatically. To get into each apartment or each unit is quite it's quite a task. It's almost impossible.
Would you have recommendations for a developer for fire prevention in those types of developments?
Oh yeah, we offer up training, and we actually expect them to take care of some of the items that we can't get to, that are like inside the unit, where people don't let us in. So we'll put that on the business themselves, or the association. I'm sorry.
Well, we really appreciate the fire department really has not made huge demands other than your apparatus, but it's a vital, necessary service, and we're very proud of our emergency services that we have here in town for our residents.
Thank you.
So appreciate that. Anybody else have questions for the fire department? Mr. O'Brien, are you all set? Okay. Thank you so much for coming out, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
So, do you want to do EMS next?
EMS, you're next up. You know, Councilwoman DeAncho, I really like this mic.
Cut it out. EMS has a section starting on page 64. Welcome.
Well, good evening. Thank you guys for having us and working with us with our budget over the years. The town has always been really supportive of EMS, and we truly appreciate that. Our budget came in this year at a 4.31 increase, primarily related to contract settlements, auto expenses, and I say payroll. We have seen an increase in volume with a decrease in volunteer participation. It's not that they're leaving, it's just that through COVID, they've been kind of hit or miss to fill shifts, and obviously in order to keep up with the volume, we've had to match that with paid staff, so that's where that comes in. Our volume over the last 2 years has increased by about 20%. We kind of gave 2019 a little shove off just because of COVID, but or 2020, but when you take it all into account, it's increased by about 20%, and through that time, we're still covering 95 to 97% of our calls by Stratford EMS, not by an outside provider. While other cities and towns have been really challenged by staffing, by losing a lot of staff, we have not particularly seen that with our paid staff. With our volunteers, we've seen some back off, as I said, but with our paid staff, we haven't really seen a huge exodus of staff. So while everybody else in the region was really hurting for coverage, we ended up doing a lot of outside coverage. Now that's really great for revenue, but in order to make sure that Stratford is not left without coverage, we've had to put some oversight in place to make sure that when we go out of town to cover those calls, we have sufficient in-town coverage as well. So that's one of the things that we've done. And then, you know, we have had to engage in a lot of mutual aid support, as I said, for the surrounding towns, particularly Bridgeport. They've also come in and helped us out from time to time, but this past year it's been more us going out than them coming in. Some of the ways that we've tried to address some of our revenue issues, which have always been, you know, an item of, you know, work that we have to do, an item of challenge. We started transporting to Yale, St. Ray's, and the VA. Again, because there's such a long transport time, just given the 95 corridor, we've had to put certain things in place to make sure that when we do that, we're not leaving the town stripped of coverage. So we put certain supervisory mechanisms in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. That has obviously increased patient satisfaction as well as revenue, because we do get miles for that. The other thing is the state of Connecticut has allowed us to do treat no transport, which basically means that, let's say we went to a cardiac arrest and we had to do all kinds of stuff for the patient on that scene. There's a lot of medications. You could typically spend up to over $1,000 in just medications and personnel and everything on that scene, and then if the patient doesn't get transported for some reason because of protocol or whatever the case may be, that's it. You just dumped, you know, $1,500 on a scene and you're not getting any revenue back. So the state of Connecticut recognizes that and has created an allowance for us to be able to bill for those services as well. And then finally, continuing to provide more community-oriented training opportunities as a service line to the public and to outside communities. We're going to be launching an ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Support, and Pediatric Advanced Life Support training for our dentists and our local nurses and doctors in the area. And we're also going to be providing some other community-based training as well over the next year. So those are just some of the major highlights.
Questions for EMS? Mr. O'Brien.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you mentioned the VA, because I had that on my list to ask you about, based on something Chris Timniak said the other night. Suppose I need transport, and I don't want Kevin, I want somebody else, no. But it's not life-threatening, but I need to be transported. Do I have a choice? Can I say I'd like to go to the VA rather than Bridgeport?
Yeah.
And then what if I'm unconscious, and how is it decided where I will go?
So when you're unconscious, the statewide protocol wants you to go to the closest emergency department, and it can't be like, I mean, I guess it could be if you were right down the street, but for us, that would be Bridgeport or St. Vincent's, and likely Bridgeport.
So if somebody like me specifically wanted the VA, I couldn't have that as a request, like on record, so.
Not for critical calls, and that's only because there's a long, you know, there's a long transport time, and in a critical case, we need to get you to a hospital and get stabilized as quickly as possible. So we respect and understand the fact that you may want that facility, but right now that's not right for you. And because you're unresponsive, hopefully we're going to make the decision for you based on that protocol.
In an emergency like that, what would you say is the average time to go from anywhere in Stratford to like Bridgeport or St. V's?
5 minutes.
Wow, that's quick.
So.
Mr. Pia?
Through you, Madam Chair. Mike, Kev, how are you guys? Question, you said something, Mike, that got me curious. You said, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 90 to 95% our Stratford EMS covers town, and then obviously there's mutual aid that fills in that gap. Have you ever done an analysis, or do you kind of track what that lost opportunity cost would be? Meaning, you know where I'm going with this, and if we're giving out 10% mutual aid to surrounding communities, my point is that Stratford taxpayers are paying for your department. Right. I think everyone, listen, you call 911, you should get help. I don't care where you live. Yeah. But I want to make sure you're picking up people, Stratford people are getting prioritized by your department first versus someone from Shelton or Bridgeport, because quite frankly, they're not paying our taxes.
Right.
So that's kind of where my questioning is.
So we do take all of that into account. The last time we hired additional staff, Kevin had put in a huge component of that as how much are we going to capture from going after that mutual aid. We still have some pockets, but generally speaking right now, being at 95 to 97% covering your own is extremely efficient. So, do I necessarily, we always say that we're behind the 8 ball on staffing, right? But can we survive, another budget year right where we are? Of course, that's, our numbers are really, really good. We're fighting, but that's what we do, so. Kevin would like to.
Through you.
Councilman, 2 things to add to your question. The first is going out of town for mutual aid is a state of Connecticut statutory requirement. So the mechanisms that Mike spoke about to determine whether or not we go out, I get a phone call 24 hours a day every time a request comes in, and if I'm not available, Mike or one of the other supervisors answer that request. And we base it on a case-by-case basis. If we feel that there's something else going on in town at the time, that's potentially a risk if we were to send that resource out. The answer is no, and we reserve that asset for our resident. To pick up on your, how does the volume and liabilities for mutual aid go into play? So every time we don't cover a call, the enterprise fund is also liable for that ambulance's transport bill. So if AMR or Nelson or whoever the mutual aid is charges, let's say $1,200, there is a lost revenue opportunity, number 1, and then the liability that we're going to have to pay that bill, number 2. So that's the way the ordinance is written.
Through you, the chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Rice.
You spoke about community programs. I was wondering, are there any available in our high schools for students to learn?
Yes. Okay. So we, first of all the high schools are required now to provide CPR AED training. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were also doing EMR training. I don't know if that has continued or not, but we market to both high schools for the EMT class. We also have several, our last babysitter class, we had probably 6 people from the local school system. The Explorer Post markets to the high school. We give the association gives almost like a scholarship to students from the high school, depending on grades and things like that. So there's a lot of things that we do with the high school.
Well, when they finish these programs, could they work for you? Are they, okay, just curious. Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien.
Can't help thinking about non-residents. We have 2 major highways going through town too, and you have to respond to many accidents there, and they're probably always non-residents. I mean, sometimes you even have to respond for a horse. You know that story, Kevin.
Horses, pigs.
Is there a fee for ambulance to be at an event? Say like there's like is there a requirement?
So.
Blues on the Beach,
There-
whatever.
There is, however, we have never enforced it.
And to that, through you, Madam Chair, to that point, to Mr. O'Brien's question, so I would assume then it's up to the responsibility of each municipality that, take Stratford, for example, we have the Merit and 95 that run through it. So our stretch on each, we are state legally responsible for. Obviously, our apparatus for fire goes on the highway, you guys do. What if it's a state police cruiser that's the state police? Is there any revenue sharing from the state end? Like if one of you guys gets clipped on the Merit administering to someone, do we get any type of reimbursement? Clipped meaning the ambulance gets smacked from behind. Do we get any reimbursement from the state?
No.
So we're taking care of their highways and we get damage and the Stratford taxpayer pays for it?
Yep.
It's good to know. Thank you.
What's the status of our vehicles?
So we are at our vehicles are pretty good, okay? But we are at the 8-year mark with the first vehicle that we did when I first got hired. So that one is up now for replacement. We actually put it off, 2 years now, based on our internal recycling plan. And normally what we would do is we would purchase a new vehicle. We always look for ways to keep those prices down by remounting a vehicle or something like that. And then we take the old vehicle and we sell it.
How many do we have?
We currently have 7 ambulances and 5 fly cars.
Any other questions for EMS? I see revenue is minus 17.04. Is that total revenues?
That is what the budget sheet says. I'm not sure how we got.
And we have 16 employed. I remember, I don't know, maybe about 3 years ago, we hired 3 or 4 years ago, additional paramedics in order to keep, to increase the percentage of ambulance in Stratford. Do you find that that's adequate?
Again, we're always a little bit behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm.
Is it adequate for what we're doing right now? Yes, but we are constantly monitoring this to make sure that, because again, we're seeing those increases every year without fail. It's not like a fluke thing, it's not like a COVID thing. We even saw it surprisingly during COVID where other surrounding towns saw a decrease. So can we cover it? Yes, we're doing a good job covering it. However, we need to keep on the horizon that there are several things coming to EMS in the near future. One of them is community paramedicine, which we would want to take advantage of as a community, and that would put paramedics out in the field trying to keep our frequent flyers that Larry works so hard with us to try and keep us from going crazy, from overburdening the system. So they would actually work with these patients to keep them home as much as possible rather than going to the ER and burdening the EMS system and the emergency department. That's going to be coming within the next probably year or two. The statute is already there. It's just the state hiring an oversight person for it. And if call volume continues to increase and volunteerism decreases, I am going to need more staff at some point.
Do you take volunteers from the college level?
Yep.
That's good. How many volunteers do you have right now?
Active, we probably have about 40 to 50. It used to be much higher. We still have one of the most active volunteer groups in the state. We're probably doing somewhere in the ballpark of 17 to 20 1,000 hours a year volunteer, which is amazing.
Wow.
Local neighboring towns are doing 7,000. So we still have one of the most active groups in the state, but they can't work when we need them to work. I need to put a second truck on the overnight. I can't, Mike. I got to be back in at work at 8 in the morning. Totally get it. I need you on the weekends. Mike, it's the only weekend I have to get stuff done at home or take care of the kids or whatever. So it's becoming harder and harder and harder. Volunteers are basically kind of cornered into just the evenings. And so, we obviously need calls covered during other times, and that's where a lot of the challenge comes in.
Kevin?
Councilwoman, the one thing I'd want to add to that is that much like the rest of the world experienced during COVID, when we do get a volunteer from particularly the college atmosphere into the system, they typically are only in the system maybe 1 or 2 months before they're clawing to get a paid job, whether with us or somewhere else. We have very limited progression and availability, especially if they're under the age of 21. They can't drive, so we don't have the capacity to really use them in a functional way. So what we do find is that our neighboring towns will typically take them from us and apply them in a paid capacity. Some places are paying as high as $30 an hour, and that can't compare when it's going to zero. So.
And I just literally interviewed somebody right before we came here, emailed me from New Jersey, filled out the whole application really well. He's a Milford guy, just going to school in New Jersey. And I said, what's your intent? And he said, well, I want to come and volunteer over the summer. Great, I'll take you, but what happens after that? Well, then I go back to school and I don't see you again. So that kind of stuff, that's the kind of stuff that really challenges a fully operational, professional organization like ours.
And the field training program takes about 3 months to get them completely trained where they can function independently on their own based on the Stratford way of doing things. So in that example, by the time that person would be usable in any kind of return on investment kind of way, they're already either going paid somewhere else or they're back at school. So it's very challenging for us.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for EMS? Thank you. Stop.
I'll make this short and sweet. We've talked to my public safety departments today about the budget, about dollars and cents, but let's never forget there's a lot of men and women behind those numbers that every day go out and risk their own personal safety for the benefit of Stratford residents. So I take that charge very seriously, and while they have to get paid for doing their job, there's still a lot of blood, sweat, and tears behind those numbers. So thank you.
And also, Larry, how much are you working with the Board of Ed these days?
So I have another job title with the Board of Ed as Director of School Safety, and which I get paid zero for. But in all seriousness, they've been wonderful. My relationships that I've been able to build with the principals, which is really the operating units of all the different schools, has been very helpful. And I think that we've really integrated ourselves as a public safety teams within those schools better to develop better safety programs, evacuation programs, lockdown programs, and we've added additional training to the schools. I implemented a elementary school training program recently to bring in public safety team members to talk to the 5th and 6th graders during lunchtime, talking about some basic first aid, personal safety, and fire safety. And that's that age where I think they're very receptive to that, and I think that will carry on through their young lives into adulthood. So,
Appreciate that.
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Rice.
Just curious, what is the starting pay for something like an EMS for someone coming out of one of those programs, like a high school?
Councilwoman, thank you for the question. We've done a couple of market analysis over the years, so an entry-level EMT right out of EMT school, so to say, who's of age, meaning 21 or older, so that they can operate the ambulances and drive, would be $17 to $19 an hour. As it stands today, why I bring that up is on line item 6026 and 27 of the budget, you'll see that there is an increase on both those line items. We're planning to do a wage increase comparable to the market effective July 1 if our budget would be approved. That would put EMTs at 25 an hour, and that would put our per diem paramedics around 32 an hour. And that's going to hopefully retain the staff that we do have on and again, be attractive to make us competitive with the surrounding towns.
Thank you so much.
It would be important to retain those people that we're training too, so that would be a good thing. Is there anything else for EMS? We appreciate all you do. I feel very safe in our town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out, guys. Appreciate it. So, are you calling Renee?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Since I can use a mic one more time, Public Works is up.
Public Works is page 39. We're calling in to Renee Sarah, the Director of Public Works. She is out ill and cannot be with us in person today, so.
Yes. All right. Yeah, so I just, you're on speakerphone for the audience on TV. Renee
And,
Sarah.
and Chris, who do you have with you?
This is Tom Albert. He's the
Tom
Deputy Public
Albert.
Works Director.
Yes. Welcome, Tom.
So Renee Sarah, the Public Works Director, is on the cell phone. I have her on speakerphone. I will run through the budget, and then I'll ask Renee if she has anything she wants to add. Any direct questions, Tom can answer, or Renee can answer. So we have everything covered. I'll start off on page 39 with the PW Administration Division. This was a 4.2% increase. It goes up based upon salary increase for employees, and the part-time employee also increased that level. Everything else remained the same. Anything else? Anything you want to add on that, Renee?
We held the line in this division, so those are the only increases. They're contractually obligated for the union employees and then the part-time employees.
So I see a notation that the Deputy Director position salary transitioning from salary to stipend, that was the same instruction that was on last year's budget, so I'm wondering, did that happen or did that not happen, and is it happening now?
You want to talk about your situation?
It's,
Are you talking about the deputy director position?
Yes, Councilwoman Dancho asked, and I was going to have Tom specifically answer what he's doing. If,
Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same instruction from last year, so if it happened already, it's already factored in, I'm thinking.
it happened last year,
Yeah. So that's already incorporated in, is what I'm hearing, and then that instruction. Okay, I was asking that because I saw that it was the same and just wanted to confirm. So that's good. And then again, gas and oil is the vehicles.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And the deputy director, that's,
That's Tom.
yeah.
And Tom, there was a pause on my, Tom is still receiving a stipend to be the Deputy Director. He's also the head of the Highways Division.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Anybody have any questions, Mr. O'Brien?
Well, I just noticed the head count went from 5.5 to 4. Is that correct?
So, it did, because the previous year, we had a Deputy Director, which was now our Director, and we had a Director who went to another town. So we're saving one position, which is Tom, who remains as the Highway Superintendent, and.
Not okay, Tom? So far.
See
after tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna watch the meeting here. The next page, we did the building inspection division earlier with Mary. So the next page is page 41, building maintenance division. This division is responsible for the maintenance and the general upkeep of all the town buildings, including the school facilities. The payroll items have increased based upon the step increases. This is a crucial part of our budget. This is the section of the budget where we get lots of calls from residents, say, hey, can you fix this? Or the council members put in their request. I noticed that so-and-so was broken. Can you send someone over? The shingles on the roof are falling. So this is where that budget comes from. The increases are relatively minor at 2.2%, including the step increases, but we did increase payroll to show a pay increase for what the custodians are getting for payroll overtime. We also increased building supplies. That is a reflection of inflation and anticipation of where we're at this year, knowing what we're gonna have to fix for next year. The calls. Everything else remained about the same.
So, Dawn,
Oh, hold on.
I just have a question for Dawn. Can you look at the payroll regular line, the very end under mayor proposed? Is that number correct? Oh, wait. Yeah.
So it looks like it was formatted with change, and I made a notation to get rid of the round that.
Okay, so it's going to
without
be
the decimal.
It's going to end with. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Renee, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Just like the outside service went up because we have a lot of contracts for maintenance, like of the elevators, fire alarms, fire extinguishers. The cost of their services has also increased. So that's what was also reflected.
The next department is page 42, the engineering department. This remained completely flat minus the salary increases for our employees in that office. The next division is the highways division, page 43. This was an increase for salaries. We also had a increase for gas and oil, equipment service as well. Any question on highways?
So equipment service, is that, what is that? That's not traffic lights, that's a,
Street sweeper.
That's all the equipment, the dump trucks, the street sweepers,
and that's under the highway division?
for the highway department, yes.
For the highway department?
And through you, Madam Chair, that's just, Tom, that's on maintenance alone? That's just maintenance, correct?
That's just maintenance,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
If we were to purchase something for the highway department, that would be in the capital plan.
Right, right. Anybody have any questions for, is there another?
It keeps going.
It keeps going.
It
We'll
keeps
keep
going.
going then.
The next page, page 44, town garage.
Mhm.
I'm looking at this here. Go ahead, Renee.
Mechanics.
Yeah. This is the mechanics. This is where fix everything. We just heard from the fire department that they fixed the truck. All of our auto mechanics are in there. All of the auto stuff we try to fix as much as we can in-house. The budget increases by essentially the payroll alone. A little more for equipment services. A little more for auto maintenance.
Do we save any money with plowing this past season? We didn't have a lot of snow. Is that where this would fall in?
A lot of the plowing was, fell on the weekends.
Huh?
Yeah. So, we don't, yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
mind.
There was some frustration we had with the snowstorms when they came in. I believe a couple came on the holidays. We don't actually budget for the snow removal. We take that out of town road aid and we take that out of the overtime line. So there's not much savings. Any savings we have from that, we put towards road repair at the end of the spring. But luckily, it wasn't a huge ordeal this year where we had to hire outside vendors to come in, and we weren't hauling snow to other facilities to, basically create space on the street for it to melt. Like we did have a light snow year.
I'm so sorry. You said that we don't have a plowing budget and that it comes from, can you repeat that for a quick moment?
Yeah, so we don't specifically have a storm snow plow removal budget. We have a line in the budget called Town Road Aid.
Oh, okay.
It comes from the state.
Some money from the state.
It comes from the state. All the towns receive that. Some towns do put in a storm line in the budget. If we feel like we have a storm which is big enough, lots of time, more frequently than not, it ends up being a FEMA reimbursable storm, which we go into the full protocols of keeping track of all the overtime hours, all the receipts, anything billable. We do get reimbursed for the big storms. Everything else we have in here, we would take out of the maintenance or the town road. Anything else? Any other lines we would take?
No, that's about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next page of the budget is the Parks Division. Renee, is there anything you want to say about the parks?
No, we basically increased based upon contractual obligations for settled contract and step increases. We did increase the overtime due to, more outdoor events being held now as a result of COVID, more sporting events. There's more parks to maintain, so the demand is higher for these guys. There is staff that does work 7 days a week once the season permits, collecting garbage, combing the beach, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what drives their overtime. Other than that, it is pretty flat. Other than that, auto maintenance, and again, it's a reflection of inflation.
Does that second shift factor in at all to save on the overtime?
The question was, does the second shift factor in to save on the overtime?
Not necessarily. It all depends on what the overtime staff is being used for. There is contract language that dictates certain levels of staff that need to be present at certain facilities. So it all depends on what the call is for the second shift. As far as the second shift doing regular maintenance, absolutely, they get more done in a day than they normally would have. We wouldn't necessarily always keep people on overtime to do that level of work, but now we're getting a lot more work done. We're taking advantage of, better weather opportunities, which does make it more efficient.
The next budget is the refuse and recycling. This is the garbage disposal. In addition to small salary increase, this is where the tipping fees have come into play, which have dramatically affected the budget over the last 5 years. You'll notice under disposal fees, it's gone from $2 million to $2.8 million. That is a huge increase. It is costing more money for us to recycle and dispose of our trash. That is happening statewide. It's not anything which is unique to us. We did have increased disposal fees. Now, it goes by weight. When everybody was cleaning out their houses during COVID and everybody's stuck in, we had a lot of bulk pickup, and then the tipping fees for all that was relatively was high.
And there was more people home.
There was
working from home.
Yeah, more people home too. That is still, it's still higher than we would have anticipated.
Right.
That number, for some reason, has not gone back to where it was pre-pandemic. So it seems like a lot of stuff is being thrown out right now in Stratford. A lot of house clean, a lot of spring cleaning.
I mean, just to put that in perspective, in 2020, regular refuse, it's your regular garbage, this is exclusive of recycling, it was almost 25,000 tons. In 2021, it went up to 27,500 tons. So we're increasing tons year after year. In 2019, it was only 22,000 tons. So you can see it has continually increased, and that is across the board. That's bulk, that's yard waste, that's regular refuse and recycling. All those tonnage for each bucket of disposable stuff has increased over the years.
So in addition to the increased tons, it's more expensive for us to dump it. So we have rising fees on top of rising tonnage, which is what's put us in the situation where we have to put in.
Are recyclables truly recycled?
No.
A lot of people do not even put the right stuff in the correct bins. So I'm wondering, what do we do with the recyclable stuff? Because
So they give us two separate tipping fees, one for recyclables, one for garbage. The recycling tipping fee is now more expensive than the regular garbage.
Chris?
Yep.
Chris, let me just speak to that. Actually, that has, this year it went down, but it goes by market. So they watch the market for what the going rate is for recyclables. Right now, it's $41.69 a ton. And just 2021, which was, the end of, the fiscal year of last year, it was $72 a ton. So it fluctuates significantly. And, as the market goes up and down, we're going to constantly be chasing this number up and down.
It's like buying lobster.
Yeah. And,
yes, Mr. O'Brien.
and Renee, how much is it per ton for refuse? It's less than the recycling, or now it was more for recycling before. It's 72, right?
I think the recycling was 68, maybe.
That sounds right.
So recycling in 2021 was $72, and regular refuse was $64.69. Right now, regular refuse is $65.75, and recyclable is $41.69, and yard waste is $42 a ton, and the bulk item is obviously $65.75. That we pay the same price for regular refuse as you do bulk item.
so when we do our spring cleanup next weekend, that's gonna. Wow. Thank you for those numbers, Renee, and I'm wondering if it's worth recycling. Hate to say that, but.
So that is actually my question. What happens when we recycle and separate our plastics and those sorts of goods?
So, Councilwoman Rice, the plan is that when you recycle something, there's an end use for the product you're recycling. With the market being down on that, and China used to take all of our recyclables and turn them into products for us. We haven't developed that. So I remember reading that there was like 52 items Connecticut law requires us to recycle, and of those 52 items, only 18 had an end use, a marketable product to use as an end. So we're recycling things which just simply, there's no market to recycle right now.
So just curious, when we recycle those goods that do have an end use, do we get any money back for those goods, or is it just goodwill?
Well, it's good, but that's why it's more expensive, because the recycling plants have to have an alternative way to dispose of the items they can't resell, that there's no product for. So that's how the recycling level got higher than the garbage level, because it's easy to just burn our garbage. The recyclables actually had to have a separate stream, separate engine, so that's where it got more expensive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, this is sad news, but does anybody have any questions on any of the topics, Mr. O'Brien?
Well, last I heard, there was still a good market for cardboard and glass. Is that still true?
Glass is heavy.
Yes.
Yes, there's still.
Yes, the cardboard that is brought down to the transfer station does get sold. We do get a little bit of money back for that stuff, but what gets thrown in the garbage is already commingled, so there's no separation for that.
And then speaking of the transfer station, would you say the staff does a good job of making sure non-residents pay to use it? Or that a lot of non-residents don't get to use it, I hope.
And if they do, they have to pay. And I don't know what the charge is for.
There's a revenue line item for the transfer station in your budget book where you'll see what comes into the transfer station. It's separate from obviously these. We're looking at just the expense side of things here.
So, it's in revenues on page 8, but we also have, we got to do the recreation budget, and that's the last one as well.
Before we get away from Public Works, I've said this several times in the last couple of years, there's a new culture in Public Works that we did not see years ago. There's a pride, the workers, they do great work, whether it's carpenter, plumbers, the guys in the garage, and it's great to see.
Yeah, a good bunch of guys.
Page 32, the rec department. This only increased based upon the minimum wage. So you'll see a lot for our summertime employees went up. The HR director talked about the increase we had to put on his side of the line for the summer help we had for their physicals and exams. Renee, do you have anything you want to add on recreation?
No, just that, they, besides step increases, they do have the minimum wage, and with that, they have to adjust, everybody, the minimum wage people are increasing, so supervisors, everybody, kind of needs to take a step above, especially if we're going to be competitive and be able to attract lifeguards and so on and so forth, so they can offer these amazing programs. They are hugely popular. We add more staff to accommodate as many programs as we can, and they do a phenomenal job in the recreation department of having enough offerings to accommodate every age level of every interest out there.
So the flood pool is open? I thought it was being renovated.
The flood pool, we weren't allowed in the flood pool during the COVID at the time. We do anticipate opening it back up and having programs.
And where
there.
do swim teams practice?
Swim teams have been practicing at the YMCA.
Okay.
We did do an agreement with them. I would have to request that you follow up with Amy Knorr, the rec director, if you want more details on that.
Okay.
But it has been one of those things where we've sort of been hodgepodging it together.
Okay. The custodian.
Yeah, we've been kind of accommodating the YMCA while their pool's been unable to be used because they were getting it rebuilt. But flood has not been available to us because of COVID and the school system not wanting the traffic in the school.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions on?
Custodian costs for the open swim lessons, training, Franklin Rec Center, girls basketball. That's all, is that all Board of Ed stuff or that's rec department stuff?
No, that's the rec department.
That's the rec department
Yeah,
stuff.
a lot of that's on the weekends we pay for.
Yeah,
It's always been that way.
okay. Anybody else have any questions? I just have a question, back to the Parks Division on page 45, just real quick. The Perhala Farm maintenance, Perhala Farm is a mess, in my opinion. What do we do with that $2,000?
So the 2,000, we pay, Renee, the question's on Perella Farm. We pay an individual to do the organization there. I've met him once. And then the $2,000 is small maintenance stuff. We buy extra so that he has the material he needs to try to
That's correct. Fencing, mulch, that kind of stuff. It's
So-
just for whatever we supply there, but he's a part-time, 19 and a half hours seasonally.
Okay.
He takes in the requests and maintains a database of who has plots there and that they collect money for those plots.
They do collect money for the plots. I was wondering, are the,
Yes.
they're charged, they get, residents are charged to have a space in Perella Farm.
Yes, yes.
Is that reflected in revenue somewhere, or no?
I believe we collect the money for this. Is that for the Save the Sound Fund, Renee?
Yes. Yes.
This goes to Save the Sound?
Yes, Save the Sound sort of runs the farm. And the part-time worker we have is from a nonprofit to manage all of that. That deal was put in years before I was here.
Okay. Okay, so then my concerns with it being a mess will be addressed at another meeting.
But we can pass that concern along. You know, we do pay the part-time employee to make sure that it's up to the standards we want.
Okay.
The individual plots, if
The
they're not
growing
being
season,
used,
I
he's
guess.
responsible for making sure that they're maintained. And if it's not the case, I would be more than happy to send an email on your behalf to.
I mean, I don't think it's that person's fault. I think the people that are there shouldn't be allowed to leave their plastic chairs and gardening tools or whatever junk is left there. It just looks bad, but this isn't for this budget meeting tonight. Any other questions for Public Works, Mr. O'Brien?
Chris and Dawn, can you give us an estimate of how much we support BOE with everything you look at? Whether I see 60,000 here for buildings, there was overtime of 190,000.
Dawn, do you know the EDO number?
Is that something that can be figured out? Like,
Yeah. Bill, every year, the town has to provide a report to the state. It's called the ED-001, and it's what the town pays for the Board of Ed that's not in their budget, but comes out of our budget, and I could make that available to you. I could email that to you.
We can give
Me
you
too.
last year's number, we're
Yeah.
required to report it, and it includes everything you were just mentioning.
Okay, so you can get that to
Yes,
us?
I
Okay,
can get
perfect.
that
Thank
to
you,
you.
Dawn. That'll be good to have maybe before Wednesday. Board of Ed is Wednesday, sorry. Any other questions for Public Works? I think they do an awesome job, and they do everything, pretty much everything in town.
They're the catch-all department.
Uh,
All right, thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you, Renee. I hope you feel better.
I'm so sorry. I do have a
Oh, go ahead,
one
Ms.
last
Weiss, go ahead.
question. I know that you are, it seems to be that you are short-staffed. Can you to talk a little bit about the staffing in Public Works?
The question from Councilwoman Rice was, it seems that we're short-staffed.
With the Public
And she
Works?
wants you to talk about just talk about the staffing. Or is there a specific area? Is
Yeah,
it
so for instance,
parks and maintenance? Which specific?
well, I'm
area?
talking about in general, but also when it comes to the trees and maintenance with the trees. In previous discussions, it was disclosed that there's a shortage and not enough help. So just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I know what trees we have. Three tree. Is it three? Oh, let me check them out. Any overflow, we have a contract with Razor's Edge to handle all the extra tree work we can't get to, or if there's a very large tree which is outside of our scope, we would pass that off to Razor's Edge on an individual per diem like project. Renee, is there anything you want to add to trees?
Also, so what you are saying is there is no need for additional staff at Public Works? I'm just looking for clarification.
Yeah. The Public Works Director is saying, no, there's no.
We're staffed appropriately. I think I've mentioned this before. You add any more staff, you got to add that much more equipment, and when there's not enough work for them to do, now they're just sitting on the sidelines, just eating up taxpayer dollars. We are currently staffed appropriately. If I thought we were understaffed, I would have requested additional headcount in this budget, which I did not. We seem to be managing really well with the staffing level we have right now.
So the complaints that I've received, just curious, again with the trees, that you're saying is it could be easily taken care of with your current staffing. You would be more than able to provide someone to come out and look at these trees.
So that's the conservation.
Yeah. Renee, the question was, all the tree complaints, we have enough staff to respond to them?
We have the appropriate amount of staff to respond to any tree that needs to be addressed immediately, but majority of people's requests for trees is nothing that has to be addressed instantaneously. These guys can get out and work on work orders and take them as they come in, and we kind of prioritize them. But majority of the tree requests are inspections, and it has to be first investigated to see if the condition of the tree, and if it's something that is an emergency, that it's ready to fall down, we put the staff on it and it comes down at that moment. Other than that, all the other tree issues we address as they come up, and we have park staff that backfill and support our tree crew if they need it as well. So we've got, extra help in the stables that can come out at any time and give any kind of assistance in a situation where there's trees that have to be addressed immediately. Other than that, it's regular work that they go out and take care of. Are there a lot of requests? Absolutely, but there's a lot of trees, and you could never staff enough people to knock it all out in a certain amount of time. They're just always going to keep coming in. Sometimes we get 10 or 20 requests to inspect trees every week.
Oh, okay. Just wondering, because this was a major complaint I heard, and many people were complaining that for months they were not able to get anyone to come out, and some people complaining about the tree branches falling on their cars and serious safety concerns, and many had not had any response. So that's the reason I'm asking. I wanted to clarify the staffing. But you're saying that you're fully staffed, so there shouldn't be an issue moving forward. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. As I've been, Kim, to your point, sidewalks, trees, things of that nature are always consistently at the top of the list for any administration, for any public works. For 4.5 years, that's been one of the largest things I've done. Some of the things proactively is one, everybody's got to put something in writing. So someone saying, I've had people say, hey, the town never came out and inspected my tree. I said, when did you call up? Show me a factual piece of in writing evidence that it was done, because that's only when you can hold people accountable. So my recommendation to you is I would tell people, put it in writing, have them email you, you can then forward it to Mike Downs, who will then get it in the system with the Public Works, because if we don't have it in writing, it can't be tracked. And to that point, I do agree with Director Sarah that the tree crews work extremely hard, as fast as they can with when the equipment's running, and I've seen firsthand, knowing that when they're down, they'll get an independent third-party company like a Razor's Edge or someone to come out and pick it up. So I would tell anybody to put something in writing and then move it forward, and that's the best way.
There is an online database system, correct, for the tree requests?
Yes, you can submit the request.
You can submit it that way as well. And I know that it is a waiting list, but as Ms. Sarah said, a lot of these requests are not emergencies. But if there is I've never had an issue with an emergency situation being addressed as soon as possible. Good.
All right.
Madam Chair, I have the answer to the EDO one. So I'd just like to state that for the record. So last year's EDO one report for fiscal year '21 had in-kind, what we call in-kind services coming out of the town's budget that are for Board of Ed at $15,069,884. And that includes our debt service principal and interest that is for Board of Ed related purposes. And if you take that out, that's about 8 million. It would be 7 million in salaries, professional technical services, utilities, and repairs and maintenance that the town contributes outside of the debt service.
So
And
that
I can
number
send you
again
that
is-
report.
That number again is 15,000,000.
15,069,884.
69,884. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you don't have the numbers for fiscal year '22 at this point?
The report is done at the end of the fiscal year in August.
Thank you. Anything further for any of the public works categories before we let Renee go? And Mr. Albert, I think we're good then. Thank you so much for coming out. Appreciate it. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Tom, right?
Thank you.
So, we have completed our agenda for the day. It is 7:31, and I'm going to recess this meeting to Wednesday, April 20th, and that will be to discuss the Board of Ed budget request at 5:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Hope you had a great weekend.